You ever so much for that insight on all of those topics. Of course, in this conflict, so many civilians are at risk on both sides. And Glenn, we wish you the best and wish you safety as this war continues on the battlefields and, of course, in the boardrooms. Let's move on now, though, to the Middle East. And according to local Israeli media, Hamas negotiators in Cairo have received a new proposal for a ceasefire. The proposal includes releasing hostages in 2 batches. This as reported by the Palestinian authorities. This presents a framework agreement to launch a negotiation for a permanent ceasefire. Hamas negotiators are reportedly holding eternal consultations with their leadership regarding the future negotiations. This comes as Cairo hosts peace negotiations for Gaza mediated by Egypt with support from Qatar and the US, seeking to revive a proposed 60-day truce plan that has stalled amid renewed tensions. Well, joining us once again on the programme is Peter Baum, the foreign editor of the weekly Blitz, joining us live from London. Peter, thank you for once again joining us on the programme today. Let's get your first reactions to this news that Hamas is going to mull over another ceasefire proposal.
We've been here several times previously in the last 18 months, haven't we? But make no mistake, this time is very different. Hamas are no longer making decisions for what's happening. The decisions are being made by their masters in Tehran. Of that there is no doubt. And overnight you may have seen there have been numerous explosions in Tehran, rocking the regime internally, and they are under severe domestic pressure. Running parallel with that, you may have also seen that Egypt, just a couple of days ago, signed what was Israel's biggest trade deal, some $35 billion of gas exploration and export and import between the two countries. Hamas's leadership has been devastated, as we know, and it is the Iranians, together with the Egyptians and the Qataris, undoubtedly, that will determine whether this ceasefire comes into being. The leadership of Hamas, though trying to create a role for themselves and to give themselves some political credibility, are being, I wouldn't say sidelined, but they are no longer the rulers of their own destiny. This is being made at a much higher level now more than ever. Up until this date, Hamas was still able to retain some semblance of credibility, but they're losing that, especially within Gaza itself. So if there is a ceasefire, and a 60-day ceasefire, and everyone hopes there will be, make no mistake about this, this will be solely driven by powers beyond Hamas's reach.
Peter, can you expand on that? Who is it that will be making these decisions? Who is it that will be influencing them? And can you provide some context on the implications that might have on the wider regional security?
Yes, certainly. It's very important that since the creation of Hamas, the people that have been pulling their strings, supplying them with weapons, giving them political support, etc., has been the Iranian regime, the totalitarian theocracy still retaining power within Iran. Very, very recently, that regime has become under increasing domestic pressure. As I think I've mentioned to you several times before, there's been a huge water crisis in Iran. There are blazes currently going on, one particularly in an oil refinery, where because of the water shortages, they're unable to put out the blaze. So it is the Iranians that realizing if they are going to hold on to any semblance of power, one of the bargaining chips they have is to put pressure on Iran, actually to decide, to put pressure on Hamas to decide what Hamas are going to do. And I truly believe it's the Iranians, together with the Egyptians, who clearly want peace with Israel and part of the Abraham Accords, as we know, and clearly have just signed this huge gas exploration deal with Israel that want to bring these hostilities to a halt and bring peace to the region. Hamas is one bargaining chip of the hostages, and I believe that this time around, Iran are going to pressure Hamas to release those hostages and come to a final agreement with Israel.
Peter, very quickly before we move on, last hour we did speak to you about these protests. Do you think that this proposal that has been sent to Hamas could be a real tipping point, not just because of what we spoke about relating to the Israeli government and their actions within Gaza, but also the possibility to get to a deal before any questions are raised about further expansions, which will potentially lead to further international condemnation?
That's a great question, and I do indeed. Netanyahu clearly is, if the domestic pressure becomes continues on this upward trajectory, he will have no option but to come to the agreement, the same pressure being put on Hamas by Iran. So the two protagonists, if you like, are being forced to this point. And unless something dramatically changes to change that dynamic within, let's be realistic, in the next 72 hours, I truly believe that this is the best opportunity for a complete halt to the ceasefire, to the war in Gaza, and a ceasefire to ensue following that.
Peter Baum, unfortunately we are out of time, but thank you ever so much as always for providing such great insight. We will continue to monitor all of the developments from the ongoing